As discussed yesterday, neither aircraft was equipped with a flight data recorder or a cockpit voice recorder, often known as the black boxes. However, we recovered this morning an electronic flight display from the B-17 and a GPS navigational unit from the P-63. The units from both aircraft were damaged during the accident. They are both being sent to the NTSB's recorder lab in Washington, D.C. to determine whether data and relevant information can be recovered from both units. The NTSB's recorder lab specializes in recovering data from electronic devices and avionics, and the data often assists in determining the probable cause. Interviews continue today with the airshow personnel and are ongoing. The content of those interviews will not be released at this time. We want to thank the public for the large number of videos and pictures that were sent to the NTSB. These images are being reviewed by our investigative staff. This will be the last on-scene press briefing. The on-scene portion of the investigation will continue and includes interviewing airshow personnel, reviewing pilot and maintenance records, and finalizing documentation, removal, and layout of the wreckage aircraft. As a reminder, a preliminary report of the accident is expected in 4 to 6 weeks, and a full investigation lasts 12 to 18 months before the final report is released. Additional information about the status of the investigation will come out at NTSB headquarters in Washington, D.C. You can follow us on Twitter at NTSB_newsroom. Now, before I take a few questions, I will remind you to please raise your hand when I call on you. Please state your name and your affiliation. I'll take those now.
David Centendry with Fox 4 News here in Dallas again. Is there any indication that there was mandatory radio communication required amongst these pilots throughout this portion of the show?
Okay, the question is there any indication that there was mandatory communication amongst the pilots in this part of the air show? I think at this point I would say yes, there was mandatory evidence of that. I believe obviously when we get further into the investigation, we will look at what's required and what isn't as far as communication goes, and that'll be part of the analysis process. Next question.
Hi, Scott Gordon from NBC5. Speaking of the radio communication, I just wondered, I know you're going through the recordings still, but do you have any evidence that the pilots were in communication before the crash or right before the crash, and was there any warning of any trouble right before the crash?
Okay, the question is basically we're just in the early process of reviewing the recording, but was there any evidence of communication between the pilots and any communication of an emergency or of the sort? Like I said, at this time we have just received the recording, so it is being processed right now and looked at by our investigative team, so I have no new information on that at this time.
Oscar Almaraz, Spectrum News. These types of shows happen all around the country all the time. Do you have any previous incidents? Do you have any numbers on statistics of incidents of this sort?
Question is, these air shows go on all the time and similar routines go on, and we're wondering if we have any information or statistics on I would assume, accidents like this at air shows. At this time, I don't have any statistics on accidents. There have been some accidents in air shows over the years. I do know that hundreds of air shows go on in the United States every year that don't have accidents, so I don't have specific statistics on that right now.
CBS 11. Looking at the schedule of the air show, it didn't seem like these two planes were part of the same any of the same demonstrations. Do you know if they were supposed to be in the same airspace at the same time?
Okay, the question is, it appears these two aircraft were not to be in the air show at the same time. Is that the question you're?
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. At this point, and it's like we said, we haven't done any analysis, but from what we can tell, there were several aircraft part of this show at this time, and both of these were part of the show and were intended to be part of this show at that time. Let me take some over here.
So William Joy, WFAA. So obviously there's a plan going into the show of the execution, to Andrea's question. Do you know where along that plan clearly a plane deviated? Where this plan went wrong, really?
Question is, there's obviously a plan for the air show and the routine that goes on. And if there was a plan out there for this, that's part of what we will be looking at, is looking at the plan and the control of the routine during the air show. But I have no further information on that at this time. I think we had some more over here.
Yes, sir. Morgan Chesky, NBC. Once you have these devices back at your lab, what is your hope to recover?
Question is, once we get these devices back at our lab, what are we hoping to recover from them? Data that these type of units may have, and I say the word may here, may have, would be things like GPS location, possible altitudes of the aircraft, and the airspeeds of the aircraft. Those are three right offhand that I think would be very important to our analysis.
Omar with CBS News. Many of these planes are vintage and restored as such, but is there a minimum requirement of modern technology they have to have in order to participate in a show like this?
Sure. So the question is, many of these aircraft are vintage aircraft, but is there a requirement for certain types of modern equipment to be in the aircraft? The answer to that is yes, there is some current type of avionics that may be required in this. I can't give you specifically what is required or not. That's something that will be reviewed within the FAA regulations and exemptions they have for these aircraft to fly and to fly in these types of air shows. Right here.
Steve Pickett, CBS 11 News. You have NTSB has requested video recordings from the general public. Help us understand the value of that from the NTSB standpoint. What does it help you assess? Is that speed, volume, formation? Give me some indication on why you need this.
The question is, we have requested video and photographs from the general public, and the question is, what kind of things are we looking to get from the video footage? Just about everything you said is what we're looking for. It'll help us determine the exact location of the midair. It will give us a layout of where each aircraft was in the process. It should help us with speed, altitude, location. There may be an angle of something out there that we're unaware of, but we received, being an air show, we received quite a bit of this, and we have staff working on it right now, and they're going to be at it for quite a while with the numbers we've received.
We can take one more question.
Okay, right here.
And one more time, David Cententry with Fox 4 News. I know you said yesterday that there was no black box, but just to clarify, is there any sort of requirement for that, or would you at NTSB recommend that these types of aircrafts should have one?
Question is, as I mentioned yesterday, these aircraft didn't have a flight data recorder or a CVR, which is commonly referred to as a black box, and nor are they required to, is what I said yesterday. And in this case, yeah, there is no requirement. That's one of the things we'll look at down the road during the analysis portion of it, if that's something that needs to be recommended. We also must remember these are very vintage, old 1940s aircraft. So that'll be something that we'll look at as a possible recommendation down the road. But I have nothing further on that to say if that's what it would be. All right.
Mike, real
Okay,
quick.
one more right here, and that'll be
Just,
it.
I'm making sure I understand.
Sure.
So the GPS recorders that you're trying to get data off of in the lab. Yesterday you talked about getting some of that same data that you were referencing, what you hope to get from just flight radar. So what's the difference in what you would get from flight radar, or maybe already have, versus what you would actually learn from these boxes? What would be the difference?
Sure. The question is basically, what is the difference between the different devices out there? What are we expecting to get data-wise, either from a box on board an aircraft or something from air traffic control? the difference would be in air traffic control, we only get hits on the aircraft's position, speed, heading, altitude, things like that, every so many seconds. And there are gaps in there, and that's where onboard devices may be able to be a little more specific, and we'll get a few more hits on exactly where those aircraft are and their speeds in between the lapses in the radar.
Can I ask a
Thank you
general
very much.
safety question? Okay.